What is your worst roommate stories? Story 1. In my last 2 years of school I rented a house split between 5 guys, one of whom was a last-minute addition that I begged them not to let live with us. I even offered to pay the rent on his room while I looked for a new one. But I got outvoted, and so we had this guy, who I'll call Roger because he looked like Roger from American Dad. Roger did not seem physically able to walk without stamping his feet. Multiple guests commented on how fucking loud he was. Oh, and he wore his winter boots inside. Roger said our Wi-Fi was too slow. He wanted to play Xbox Live while watching Netflix. So he ran an Ethernet cable from our kitchen, through the front hall and up the stairs into his bedroom. He didn't tape it down nearly either. It hung low in several spots, giving our house the appearance of a spaceship in disrepair. He loudly proclaimed how brilliant he was and how much faster the internet was now, not realizing someone had already cut the Ethernet cable. Roger frequently fell asleep with loud music or TV playing on his tower speakers. Would not turn it off unless his favorite roommate asked him to. Yes, he would tell the other 3 of us to fuck off and then act all apologetic if Juan would tell him to be quiet. One night it came to a head. He fell asleep during exams with some loud music playing and it woke the whole house up. All of us knocked on his door for almost an hour trying to get him to turn it down. When he wouldn't answer, we decided to jimmy his lock and turn it down ourselves. He was fast asleep with noise-canceling headphones on. All this time he was falling asleep to music and TV. It was just to antagonize us. Story 2. Moved into a house with my 3 friends. One was my best friend, and he was cool. The other was his girlfriend and our mutual friend, who was also another girl. We were the luckiest people alive because we were renting a 3-bedroom house for $500 a month. My buddy grew up poor, and I was homeless for a year. We both knew how lucky we were. We fought hard for everything we had, but the 2 girls we lived with were spoiled. They fucked everything up for us. They would do everything from invite strangers over to party without asking us on work nights to skipping the rent. They would steal our food and never go grocery shopping. They would turn the AC down to 63 deg in the middle of 100 egg heat waves, causing our utility bill to be higher than our rent. They'd break shit in the house and start arguments with each other. The one girl even brought in 2 friends to live in her bedroom with her for 6 months without even asking us. I worked a seriously demanding job at the time. I woke up at 4 a.m. every morning and got to work by 5 a.m. I wouldn't be home until anywhere from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. most nights. It was incredibly stressful. This was very difficult when the girls kept inviting anywhere from 10 to 30 people to party at our house every fucking night. I even came home at 1 a.m. once to find a stranger passed out in my bed covered in vomit. They also played music so loud every night that it would shake my bedroom wall. The girls didn't give a fuck because they just called out constantly and eventually quit their jobs. Did I also mention that half these strangers were teenagers who were illegally drinking at our house and then driving home? One night, my friend's girlfriend got drunk and started stabbing the bedroom door with a knife. This isn't even our property. My buddy went to stop her, and she stabbed him 3 times. I had to go pin her against the wall and have some random stranger come grab the knife from her friend. It was fucking insane. I had to beg the landlord not to kick us out and replace the door. One time, somebody in the house ripped the shower head off in the shower during one of their parties. The threads were ruined, and I had to replace the entire pipe. They also raided our fridge and went through my month's worth of food I had just bought in a single night. This was a reoccurring event. I eventually bought a mini fridge and a lock for my door. That worked for a while until someone drunkenly fell through my door in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. One of the girl's friends fucking hated me because I'd always come out and kick people out. See, my roommate was a small girl who would tell me she'd stop doing this shit, but then do it the next day anyways. She ended up befriending this huge girl who would shit talk me constantly in my own house for her. The bitch would constantly disrespect me in front of people and tell them to keep partying. She didn't even fucking live there. She just came over to talk shit, get drunk, and do coke on the living room table my buddy and I bought. That table also got broke in 2 one night. One time, they had so many people in the house that a floor joist broke. My buddy and I had to fix it to keep us all from getting kicked out. It cost us a ton of money and an entire weekend that I should have spent relaxing. It's just another thing to add to the list I had to fix there. I fixed lights and windows that were shattered, punched drywall, toilets, holes in the yard from cars parking in the yard, outlets that were ripped out, paint that was scratched or drawn on, our mailbox after being hit by a drunken teen, countertops that had been burned by thousands of cigarettes, busted water pipes from idiots crawling under the sink. I could go on all day. I spent thousands on this house to avoid losing the only place I could afford to rent. One day I came home from work to a complete nightmare. They broke half the drywall in the living room. Somebody had scratched up the hardwood floor so bad that half of it would need to be replaced. The curtain rods on 2 of the windows had been ripped off the wall. The kitchen sink had been pulled off the wall and had leaked into the floor all night. Our refrigerator had been turned over entirely. This was when the table I bought was snapped in 2. There was vomit all over the house. People were passed out on the ground everywhere. There was coke on every flat surface in the house. My bookshelf had been knocked over, and half of them were burnt in the yard from what I heard my buddy tell me. I just quit that day. I recorded it all, met up with the landlord, and showed them the video later that day. She was understandably furious. I admitted to her that I had been repairing things for about a year now to hide it from her. She wasn't even angry at me, surprisingly. She was just happy one of her tenants was being honest. I sent her all the video evidence and told her that the people were all still there when I left, just passed out on the floor. I told her I had found another living arrangement and had to leave. She thanked me and I left. I had packed all my stuff that night and left without saying a word. About the time I got done talking to the landlord, my roommate was messing me how she needed help cleaning and fixing the house. I just ignored her and took all my stuff to my girlfriend's house. She later messaged me, saying the cops were there. She had an entire court case about it and was evicted. She had to pay the last month's rent and utilities alone, as well as all the damages. I haven't talked to her since then. Ash, if you're reading this, fuck you, bitch. Story 3. Early in college, I stayed in the house with 3 roommates. In the 8 months that I was there, they washed the dishes about 3 or 4 times. They would do the thing of letting dishes soak for days, weeks on end, sometimes in bleach water, in lieu of actually washing them. It even got so bad that they would replace their pots and pans instead of washing them. I had limited myself to a single cup, plate, bowl, etc. so to keep from adding to the hoard. Even kept my groceries in my dorm mini fridge that I kept in my room. A couple times, I spent a couple hours washing all of their dishes just so I could have enough room to wash my own. Also with the naive hope that maybe once they had a clean slate, they would keep up with it. It didn't take, of course. Eventually, I just got fed up with that and washed my dishes in the bathroom. I ended up leaving and getting my place shortly thereafter. While I'm still friends with most of them nearly 25 years later, I never had roommates again. Hey guys, are you enjoying the video? If so, please like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Anyway, back to the stories. Story 4. I lived with 2 other of my really good friends at one point. One was fine and dandy. The other I am no longer friends with, and this is partially the reason. He was a bartender and he loved to party. He would routinely bring groups of people back to our place after work, often around 3 a.m. One time, I had to be up for work at 6. He brought a bunch of his coworkers back to our place, shit-faced, and they started playing Rock Band at 3:30 a.m. then got upset when I told them to fuck off. Next, due to the fact that he partied so much, he would sleep in. He also had an alarm clock that would go off until he turned it off. You could hear his alarm clock throughout the apartment. For some reason it wouldn't wake him up. You could sit there and listen to it go off for like 30 minutes. But the second you opened his door, it would wake him up and he would be like, "Oh sorry," and then turn it off. This happened almost every day. I would pound on the walls shouting at him to turn it off, but he wouldn't until you actually went in the room. He would get mad if you came in to turn it off for him. Despite the fact that he worked nights, his alarm was set for early in the morning for some fucking weird reason. Finally, our lease was coming up. We all agreed to resign. We needed all 3 of us to afford it. We kept asking him over and over if he was going to resign, and he was always like yes, yes, yes. The day we had to resign, I left for work, and my other buddy left for work. We planned to meet later to go resign. A couple hours later, I'm at work and my other roommate calls me and says, "Yo man, I just got home, and all of our other roommates' shit is gone." I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, all his shit is gone, and there's a letter just saying sorry, not resigning." He then proceeded to ghost us for weeks. We eventually ended up confronting him at his work, where he eventually admitted to us that he had never planned on resigning. He felt the best way was to just wait till we left for work, and then move all his shit out so he didn't have to deal with the confrontation. This same guy had a crippling drug and alcohol addiction that we helped him beat, and then he proceeded to treat us and tell us that we were enablers despite the fact that we weren't the ones drinking and doing drugs. He was. We don't talk anymore. Story 5. I had one roommate who I found out was dealing random pills. Then one day he came home with a massive chemical burn on his arm, and a few days later a mysterious man who didn't speak much English came knocking on our door with a huge aloe leaf. We think he was cooking meth. Nice guy though. The next roommate after that place was a woman with a 10-year-old daughter. She was insane. She told me it would be just the three of us. Then as soon as I moved in, her baby daddy was full-time living on her couch in the house 24/7. 2 months later, she told me she was going to raise the rent because we're using more water than 3 people should be. Yeah, no shit, I wonder why. I told her I was going to find my own place because the rent was the same at that point. It was raining horribly on moving day, so we had to reschedule. I told her this and she seemed fine, but then changed her mind randomly and kicked down my door. She started pushing me around, trying to start a fight and screaming at me. I gently shoved her back and she screamed, "Don't touch me." I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Do you really want to fight me?" She got confused and said, "Ooh, no." So I kicked her out of the room and continued packing. When I went downstairs to get more stuff, she went into this crazy conspiracy theory. She said I was a prostitute sleeping with married men and doing cocaine. When I asked where she got that info, she said, "I know you've been working at the club. You lied to me. I should have you arrested." I said, "I put my job on the application with the number of the club." She said, "Oh, well, I didn't read it." Story 6. My neighbor and her boyfriend, whom I had only known for about a month, talked me into moving in with them, saying I could save money. I was emotionally wrecked and in a weak state at the moment, and I had gone to them for emotional support and someone to talk to, and they saw me coming a mile away. They were lazy, narcissistic hillbilly trash who refused to work. He was working on trying to get disability for a supposed back injury that only became apparent if he was going to court, going to the doctor, or refusing to do housework. She was on SSI for a learning disability, but her check went almost entirely toward movies and entertainment when it would arrive. The one paying the bills was Walter's elderly father, who had earned his Social Security. They had a baby who was Jolene's crutch for getting her way on everything. Every time life hit her hard, her argument would start with, "I have a 20-month-old baby." The fear of CPS visiting the home would almost always be thrown in, as well as numerous threats toward anyone who might dare to call them. House needed cleaned. My job. Unexpected bill. My rent went up to where I was paying these loons over $400 divided by month by the time I moved out. Privacy. Not allowed, because Jolene was afraid I would spread dirt on her family and get CPS called. My room was busted into at any time of day or night, or whenever she felt like ranting. I couldn't get a good night's sleep, and I had to be at work at 6 a.m. with a 45-minute commute. The funniest thing, I was the one doing them wrong. When I finally got out of there, they demanded money for all the food I had eaten, accused me of hurting the baby, said my family had called them making threats and that I had cussed her out, and tried to hold all my stuff until I paid up. I did end up getting most of my stuff out by threatening to bring the police with me to get it. And that was my one victory in the end. I left after 4 months and never looked back. This all happened almost 15 years ago, and I still have some residual PTSD from some of my experiences living with these people. Story 7. In my first year at university, I was randomly matched with my roommate. We were friends for the first 3 months. I went home one weekend, and usually before I leave I clean my side of the room as well as any weekly chores. I came back to my room after the weekend and saw that my side of the dorm was completely messed up. My bed was distraught, there was crumbs over my desk, my bins had been tampered with. I was confused because I knew I cleaned it. I asked my roommate at the time if she had people over and messed up my room. She denied it. That night I texted my mom saying that I'm pretty sure she used my side, which is fine as long as it's cleaned after. I was ranting to my mom about how it's wrong and she should be a better roommate and own up to it. I then cleaned up the mess and went to bed. For the next few weeks she stopped talking to me completely. Throughout the weeks I would text my mom and friends about the whole situation and how it's weird. A mutual friend of mine and the roommate had asked me if we were still not talking. I had said no. She stopped talking to me after I went home that weekend. He then told me the truth. My roommate for months had been waiting until I fall asleep to take my thumb and use it to open my iPhone and read all my messages. He told me that she stopped talking to me because of the messages I would send to my mom, friends. The mutual friend only told me then because he witnessed it, and she said it's fine, she's a heavy sleeper, and thought it was wrong. I couldn't believe it. One night after the mutual friend told me, I decided to see if she'd do it again. I had a coffee and fell asleep. When she thought I was sleeping, I felt her do it and snoop through my phone for 20 minutes. After that, I went to the residential office and switched rooms. She has denied this ever since. That was the last time I saw her. She ended up dropping out of school the following year. Story 8. TW suicide. She seemed great at first. We became friends, and later my need for a place to stay coincided with her needing a roommate. So I moved in. She was like Jekyll and Hyde. She went from being a nice friend to a total narcissistic nightmare. I had some things that I couldn't keep in my room because it wasn't big enough. She knew about it before I moved in and told me that I could store it in the shed in the back garden. A week after moving in, she asked me to move it into the dining room that wasn't being used because she wanted the shed as a playroom for her kids. Then she wanted me to move my boxes to the living room. Then I had to move everything back to the shed. That last time she asked me to move it was right before I went to work. Her full-time nanny decided to help out while the kids were having a nap and started moving the boxes to the shed without my knowledge while I was at work. She got home before I did and found the nanny moving my things. When I got home, she started screaming at me, asking me how dare I ask the nanny to do what she told me to do. The screaming went on for about an hour, and every time she seemed to lose steam I'd try and explain my side and she'd start screaming at me again. She screamed at me for things every single day. Every single time it was either something her kids did or something like only getting takeout for myself instead of feeding the whole household. Once I did get takeout for everyone and I got screamed at because she wanted something different. Nothing I did was good enough. She almost never had food in the house, so her kids would raid my fridge and eat all my food. She and her kids would use all of my things whenever they wanted to. How can someone use a half bottle of conditioner on their hair at a time? I'd use it once and the next time there wasn't anything left. Or using my razor to shave. Or use my face cloth to wipe her baby's bum when changing nappies. It was gross and became horribly expensive because I had to keep replacing things. I started locking my bedroom door whenever I wasn't home. She got upset because she and her kids couldn't get in to steal my stuff, so she broke the door. That was the last straw. I found another place and moved out a few days later. Thankfully, it was an informal arrangement. I wasn't on the lease, hadn't signed a contract, and hadn't paid a security deposit either, so it didn't cost me anything to leave. My mental health tanked during my 2-month stay and I was suicidal by the time I left. I needed a 3-week stint in the psychiatric ward soon after leaving. Before moving in, I actually pitied her because her husband had committed suicide a few months before I met her. After being stuck with her screaming for 2 months, it made sense. Story 9. Had a roommate when I was in the military that ended up having the maturity of a 12-year-old. This guy was playing with my 3-month-old puppy and the puppy was grabbing at a toy that my roommate was holding. The puppy caught the guy's finger, and this guy slapped my puppy so hard in the face that he gave my dog a black eye. The roommate asked if his girlfriend could move in. We'd all agreed to split rent evenly. My wife and I were in the master bedroom, but we'd bought the washer and dryer and furnished the whole house, and all 3 parties had agreed this was fair. The guy's GF moves in and she's completely useless. The 2 of them never cleaned ever, their room or any other part of the room. They'd sit on the couch and watch the other 3 people living with them clean the house every weekend. His GF started to complain that it wasn't fair that rent was split evenly. She had just quit her job and wasn't working. The roommate decided to not pay his share of the rent 1 month because he made the sound financial decision to spend $800 on a drone and couldn't afford rent. He then decided to chase my dogs with the drone. My wife and I has to go out of town for 10 days to go to our wedding ceremony on the other side of the country. We'd set up someone to watch the dogs while we were gone. But roommate's GF wasn't comfortable having strangers over. We asked her to watch them instead, and she agreed. It turns out she spent the whole time sitting on the couch, not letting the dogs go out throughout the day. They pissed everywhere. She put them alone in my empty bedroom at night, and they destroyed their dog beds. We came home to a house that reeked of puppy piss, and had to spend almost $300 to replace the dog beds and rent a carpet cleaner the day I came home from my honeymoon. She then asked if we would cover $100 of their rent because she watched the dogs for us. At this point, I had maxed out a credit card trying to make sure my wife and I weren't evicted. At a house meeting with these buffoons, I was told by this individual sometimes, you just go into debt, and he compared his negligence of paying the rent he agreed to pay to when he loaned his truck to a friend and it was involved in an accident. They then informed us 10 days before the annual lease was renewed that they were moving out. They fucked us over so hard, but they ended up putting our 3rd roommate in the worst situation out of all of us. I had to take out a consolidated loan to repay the credit card debt, and I just paid it off this month. This all took place 6 years ago. Fuck that asshole. Story 10. Welp, I have PTSD from the events of freshman year. Freshman year was the worst. It was first time living away from home and from my family. I had done the roommate selection thing and it seemed all 3 of us would pair well. It went well for the first month, though the 3rd person ended up not moving in and the 2 choose someone else that I was just like me about to move into the dorm. Then they started underage drinking, staying up late, blasting music, bring people over and not locking the main door so anyone could just come in. They refused to carry their keys with them, instead just left the door unlocked. Many nights we just had people waltz in. especially terrifying because it was guys that would come in. I personally don't care if people stay up late, but often asked if they could keep the noise down as I had morning classes, and they did not. They did not and would turn the volume up. In regards to underage drinking, the university had strict policy, and we only had on fridge. I was not going to get in trouble for having alcoholic beverages. I eventually got my own mini fridge, and kept all my stuff in there as well as a basket for dry goods. They also never cleaned the commons area and the kitchen area, and it smelled horrendous, moldy, and there were flies. Now the boys. I was very much not okay with the opposite gender being in our dorm at all times, especially since you would have to leave your room to go to the bathroom. When I brought this up, I was told they are okay guys and not the rapey ones. One particular guy would harass me, bang on my door, try to get into my room, followed me from the dining hall back to my dorm, would wait for me in the commons area. The other 3 female roommates thought this was funny and would laugh at me being uncomfortable. I stopped showering at night and who hide under my bed when I heard his voice, as well as push stuff up against my door. He also grabbed me up in a hug when I was in the bathroom. I was paralyzed, I couldn't say anything. He was grabbing on me. It was scary. He tried to apologize and say he was drunk. Many times I asked for help from the RAS. Many RAS are shit. Making sure people have a fun freshman year is no reason not to enforce university rules. I used to cry myself to sleep, and I was so scared to leave my room. I would even get up super early to take a shower just to make sure that someone wasn't in the dorm. I put up with this for a semester before finally filing out a form and meeting in person with the coordinator to change my living situation. The weekend before changing my living situation, one of the female roommates attacked me and 2 upperclassmen I had brought over to help me pack. They had to physical hold her back. I was trying to clean up some things in the living room, like wiping the stuff off of the fridge. I had to file a police report, and the police came and moved me that night to my new living space. I have PTSD from the semester-long events with the male who stalked and harassed me. People don't take stalking as seriously as they should. I am very hypervigilant around the members of the opposite sex. It has taken years for me to even be comfortable having male professors again. I still am very uncomfortable with males entering my living spaces. The 4 people who made my freshman year of undergrad a living hell, fuck you all.